She made a $100,000 mistake in under 12 seconds. That's exactly how long it took for the lake to drop just 2 inches before the entire illegal floating solar platform Karen Langley had slapped together on my private property started groaning like a dying robot in a bad sci-fi flick. Panels tilted, battery casings hissed like angry snakes, and one pontoon scraped the muddy bottom with a metallic screech that echoed through the whole valley. There she was, paddling around in her cute little aluminum boat like Captain Planet herself, screaming into her walkie-talkie as if she could bully physics into submission. She spun toward me, eyes bulging, and shrieked, "Stop the drainage right now. This is community property. You can't do this." What she didn't know, what none of those pearl-clutching HOA sheep knew, was that every drop of water, every inch of lake bed, and every fish swimming in it had belonged to my family since my grandfather carved it out with a borrowed bulldozer back in 1964. My engineering degree gave me the know-how. Her raging ego gave me every ounce of leverage I needed. If you've ever dreamed of watching an HOA Karen lose her entire empire in glorious real time, buckle up. This was the moment her environmental masterpiece began its very public, very muddy descent into oblivion. My name is Marcus Hale, and for 23 years I've been a water systems engineer. The guy who actually understands that water doesn't care about your Instagram hashtags or your HOA bylaws. My grandfather taught me that long before any degree. He bought these 27 acres when the land was still considered worthless scrub, just stubborn clay and a natural depression that collected rainwater like nature's own coffee cup. He didn't hire crews. He drove that dozer himself, shaping every curve of the shoreline until the lake became a living thing instead of a hole in the ground. Weekends with him were sacred. We'd wake before sunrise, mist rising off the water like it was reluctant to leave, and he'd hand me a shovel. "Fix what the storms broke," he'd say, packing soil by hand because machines couldn't reach the tight corners. Other days we stocked fish by the bucket, watching silver flashes ripple the surface before vanishing into deeper shadows. My favorite mornings were valve days. He'd open that old steel box beside the cattails, turn the wheel, and water would surge through the pipe with a low, steady hum. That's the lake's heartbeat, boy. Never ignore it. When he passed 12 years ago, there was no grand speech. He simply sat on the porch, handed me the deed folder and said, "Protect the water. Protect what's ours." That sentence became my religion. The lake wasn't just inherited dirt. It was sanctuary. Morning mist clinging to the surface, cattails swaying like they were dancing to music only they could hear. The world finally quiet enough for a man to think straight. Every bolt on the valve system, every inch of shoreline, every ripple felt like responsibility. I'd survived floods that chewed entire banks away, droughts that cracked the mud into jigsaw puzzles, and one nightmare failure that took 72 straight hours of repairs. But I'd never dealt with a human disaster until Karen Langley showed up. She got elected HOA president last spring, and immediately treated the job like her personal brand launch. Eco-leadership, sustainability pioneer, green revolution. She sprayed those buzzwords around like cheap perfume to hide the stench of desperation. The neighbors ate it up at first. Who doesn't love someone promising to save the planet while wearing perfectly pressed khakis? But patterns emerged fast. New rules disguised as green initiatives. Public announcements praising her own brilliance. A growing obsession with being the face of environmental progress, even when the facts refused to cooperate. She banned certain porch lights because they disrupted nocturnal ecosystems. No studies, just Karen's word. Mandatory green inspections, where she'd stroll onto your property with a clipboard and lecture you about mulch choices like you'd personally offended Mother Earth. The biggest red flag? Her sudden declaration that every water source in the neighborhood was now a shared community environmental asset, including my lake. When that gem appeared in the updated guidelines draft, I paid her a visit. Not yelling, just calm, factual. "My lake isn't community property, Karen. It's deeded private." She smiled that plastic smile, tapped her clipboard and said, "Oh Marcus, natural resources don't respect property lines. They belong to the environment." Right then I knew what kind of predator I was dealing with. She wasn't protecting anything except her own ego. Neighbors started feeling the squeeze too. Families got fined for the wrong fertilizer. A retiree got scolded for trimming his own trees without ecosystem approval. She even installed recycling cameras at the dumpsters to catch non-compliant behavior. People grumbled, but nobody pushed back. She wrapped every power grab in environmental guilt so thick you felt like a climate criminal just for breathing. Me? I stayed quiet. My lake was private deeded bulletproof. At least that's what I believed until the morning I came home and heard machinery humming across my water. I walked down the path and froze. There it was, a half-built floating solar monstrosity the size of a small house, anchored straight into my lake bed. Solar panels gleaming like they owned the place, batteries the size of refrigerators, cables snaking everywhere. And Karen directing the crew like a Hollywood director, megaphone in hand. Faster, everyone. This is for the greater green good. I cleared my throat. Mind telling me what the hell you're doing on my property? She turned, all smiles and fake concern. Marcus, this is our community eco-hub. The lake is a shared resource now. Didn't you read the new guidelines? Think of the carbon savings. I held up my phone, already recording. The deed says otherwise. Tear it down. She laughed like I told a joke. Sweetie, you're being so possessive. We're all in this together, remember? That was the moment I decided to stop being polite. The next weeks were pure HOA theater. Karen started a whisper campaign faster than you could say virtue signal. Neighborhood Facebook group posts about selfish holdouts blocking progress. Anonymous notes in mailboxes calling me anti-environment. One neighbor actually cornered me at the mailbox cluster. Come on, Marcus, it's just a little platform. Karen says it powers the whole clubhouse for free. I smiled thinly. Did Karen also mention she never filed permits? The neighbor blinked. Well, she said paperwork was in progress. Classic. I stayed silent, documented everything, and waited. Because I knew physics doesn't do drama, it just does consequences. Then came the morning I filed the official environmental violation report at the county office. I walked in with a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. Timestamps, GPS coordinates, drone photos from every angle, hydrology notes, and 3 highlighted copies of my grandfather's deed. The receptionist's eyes widened. Is this everything? I nodded. Someone treated my lake like their personal Instagram prop. They took it seriously. Within 2 hours an inspector was assigned and the case fast-tracked because of potential hazardous materials over water. That alone told me Karen hadn't just overstepped. She detonated a regulatory landmine wearing designer boots. Inspector Janet Foster showed up the next morning in a white county SUV, clipboard under one arm and a steel case of testing gear in the other. She looked like someone who'd spent 20 years chasing idiots and had 0 patience left. Mr. Hale, County Environmental. Show me this floating circus. We walked the shoreline. She scanned the lake with a slow, calculating stare. Bigger than the report said. She measured depths, marked anchor points with neon flags, took sediment samples, launched a drone for overhead footage. Every movement was precise. At one point she muttered, "No containment barriers? Extremely reckless." When she tested water near the platform, her frown deepened. Trace electrolytes. New ones. Shouldn't be here. I felt my jaw tighten. So it's already leaking. She didn't sugarcoat. Something is. If it's those batteries, we've got a serious problem. Word traveled faster than Karen's ego. She marched down the path in a screaming green blazer meant for photo ops, not fieldwork. Hello, Inspector. I'm Karen Langley, HOA President. I'd love to give you context. This is part of our award-winning sustainability initiative. Foster didn't even look up. Ma'am, step back. Formal assessment in progress. Karen tried again, voice dripping honey. But this represents our commitment to. Foster cut her off cold. Ma'am, this installation appears unpermitted and environmentally non-compliant. Step aside. The color drained from Karen's face like someone pulled a plug. Unpermitted? No, it's community-driven. Foster finally turned, stare sharp enough to cut glass. Did you file engineering assessments? Hazardous materials forms? Water impact reports? Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Foster snapped her notebook shut. Then this is a violation. Mr. Hale, expect official action soon. Karen pulled me aside, voice trembling with barely contained rage. Marcus, you didn't have to escalate. You're making us look bad. I looked at her shaking hands and smiled for the first time in weeks. I didn't make anything worse. I just told the truth to someone who actually enforces rules. Her expression said it all. She finally realized the HOA wasn't the final boss. The county was. And the county wasn't impressed by green blazers. 2 days later, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. The clubhouse was packed. Whispers followed me like shadows. Karen stood at the front, flanked by giant printed diagrams of her precious platform like campaign posters. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. Everyone, thank you for coming on short notice. As you may have heard, the county inspector visited our renewable energy installation due to a complaint. Her eyes flicked to me like daggers. This platform provides clean power and represents our commitment to sustainability. Now it's in jeopardy because of unnecessary interference. Murmurs rippled. She pressed on. The county simply misunderstood. This is temporary, reversible, and fully beneficial. A board member nodded like a bobblehead. Then came the emotional pivot. We should focus on unity, not division. Someone chose to escalate instead of collaborate. That was my cue. I stood slowly, every eye turning. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. Karen, if the platform is legitimate, show the permits. The room froze. She blinked hard. Marcus, the paperwork is in progress. I stepped closer. Then show the applications. Silence. Faces shifted, confusion, suspicion, anger turning toward her. An older neighbor, Mrs. Walsh, stood up. Karen, did you actually get approval? Another voice. You said everything was filed. Karen stammered. It's complicated. Environmental projects require flexibility. I held up my binder. Inspector Foster found 0 applications. 0 assessments. 0 permissions. Nothing. Whispers surged into a wave. Karen's face went sheet white. This is being blown out of proportion. Mrs. Walsh shot back. You misled us. The treasurer cleared his throat. Karen, why is the HOA paying monthly maintenance on an unpermitted structure? That's illegal. Her knees visibly buckled. I repeated it slowly, letting every syllable land like a hammer. Show the permits. She couldn't. And everyone finally understood why. 2 mornings later, a certified envelope hit my doorstep, county seal and all. Inside, a formal cease and desist order addressed to the HOA shut it down immediately. The violations list read like a greatest hits album of stupidity. Unauthorized construction, hazardous materials over water, failure to file impact reports, improper anchoring, untested electrical work, and unlawful use of private property. A separate page asked for my cooperation as owner. I signed it that afternoon. Meanwhile, the HOA was imploding. I overheard Karen across the street arguing with board members. We can challenge this. It's government overreach. Someone shouted back. You lied to us. Later that day, I heard the platform still humming. Panels vibrating, inverters buzzing. She'd ignored the order. I wasn't surprised, just stunned by the sheer recklessness. She stood at the water's edge with 2 board members, tablet in hand. We can't shut it down. If we lose power, we lose data continuity. A board member hissed. You're violating a legal order. Karen snapped. I'm protecting progress. An hour later, Inspector Foster returned with 2 additional officers. No greetings. Foster's voice carried across the field like a judge's gavel. Mrs. Langley, you are in violation of a direct order. Step aside immediately. Karen tried the charm offensive again. Inspector, if you just let me explain. Foster cut her off. You were told to cease operations. You did the opposite. The officers moved past her, documenting the still running system. Foster looked exhausted. This is now an enforcement matter. Karen reached out as if she could physically block them. You don't understand. Foster's glare could have frozen lava. No, you don't understand. Illegal installations risk contaminating water supplies. You gambled with public safety. Within minutes, bright orange enforcement notices were taped everywhere. Karen sank to her knees on the dock, staring at the platform like it was her dying child. The county scheduled controlled drainage for the next morning. Low fog clung to the water when I arrived at the valve box with Foster's team. My grandfather's old brass key felt heavier than usual. Foster nodded. Begin when ready. I slid the key in, turned it slowly. A deep resonant groan rose from the pipe. Water surged downward. At first the platform floated steady, still humming defiantly. Karen appeared 20 minutes later, paddling frantically. Stop. This is vandalism. Foster stayed calm. Ma'am, stand back. This is official investigation. The first signs of strain appeared after another inch dropped. The left side dipped. I murmured, tilt starting. Officers scribbled notes. Another inch. The pontoon scraped the lake bed with a metallic screech. Sparks danced beneath the battery housings. The platform lurched 3 degrees, then 6, then 9. A mounting bracket snapped with a sharp crack. A battery unit rolled, slamming into the solar array and shattering 2 panels in spiderweb fractures. Electrical arcing erupted, blue-white sparks snapping angrily. Karen screamed, "Shut it off! Someone turn it off!" But nobody could. And nobody would. Gravity took over. The entire structure pitched forward in slow-motion horror. Panels plunged into rising mud. Battery casings hissed as they hit water, releasing murky plumes. The crowd that had gathered along the shore gasped. One neighbor whispered, "My God!" Then the final roll. The platform flipped onto its back, pontoons pointing skyward like the belly of a dead whale. Panels cracked, cables snapped, the last batteries disappeared into muck with wet, gurgling thuds. The whole $100,000 eyesore swallowed by the lake bed, not by sabotage, not by malice, but by the simple, merciless laws of engineering and the consequences of unchecked arrogance. Karen stood frozen in her boat, trembling. Her phone slipped from her hand and plopped into the water mid-livestream. She'd been broadcasting climate heroes under attack. Perfect black comedy. The crowd didn't cheer. They just stared in stunned silence as reality finally sank in. The collapse was only the beginning. What followed was slow, procedural, and devastating. Within 48 hours, the county declared the lake a restricted environmental zone. Yellow caution markers floated everywhere. A hazmat team arrived the next day, diving with clinical precision, pulling up shattered panels, bent brackets, ruptured casings leaking chalky residue. The cleanup bill started at $28,400, plus another $6,800 for filtration. Because the installation was unpermitted and on private property, the liability landed squarely on the HOA, and specifically on Karen, who'd signed every authorization without board approval or legal review. When the official invoice landed in her inbox, witnesses said she turned translucent. The fines stacked like bricks: $19,000 for environmental hazards, $14,000 for electrical work over water, $9,000 for ecosystem damage, $8,500 for ignoring the cease and desist. HOA funds couldn't cover it. Emergency assessment: $12,300 per household. The outrage was volcanic. The same neighbors who'd once applauded Karen's speeches now surrounded her in the parking lot. "You did this," one woman shouted. "You put us in debt for your fantasy." Local news picked it up in 3 days. Headline: HOA president faces massive fines after illegal solar project collapses into private lake. Her old consulting business failures resurfaced online. Comment sections roasted her alive. This is what happens when ego wears a green mask. Within a week, Karen resigned. Within a month, she listed her house. Within 2 months, she was gone, leaving behind debt, scandal, and the faint smell of burned plastic every time someone mentioned her green initiative. The neighborhood shifted from chaos to clarity. People avoided me at first out of embarrassment, then began approaching one by one. Mrs. Walsh, the new president, shredded the old eco guidelines on her first day and announced, "Permits first, slogans never." She required legal review and community vote for every future project. Transparency wasn't optional anymore. It was the new religion. Volunteers showed up to restore the shoreline, pulling debris, replanting native grasses shoulder to shoulder with county specialists. The same people who doubted me now worked beside me to fix what they'd blindly supported. 3 months later, the lake was back to its old rhythm. Hazmat markers gone, water clean, turtles sunning on logs again. I walked the shoreline at dawn exactly like I used to with my grandfather. The cattails stood tall. Fish darted near the surface. Everything breathed again. One evening, Mrs. Walsh posted in the group chat, "Thank you, Marcus, for reminding us what stewardship really means." Reactions flooded in. Not performative hearts, but genuine respect. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments and be honest. Was Karen Langley wrong for trying to save the planet on someone else's private lake? Or was I the real villain for refusing to let her steal my grandfather's legacy under the banner of green progress? Tell me, who was truly in the wrong?